All right. Okay. Assalamualaikum everyone, and a very good evening from Singapore. Welcome to the fourth webinar, jointly organized by Ethis and Islamic Finance at Singapore. In this webinar, we host our special guest from UK who has produced an innovative model of business financing. Adopted from the Quran, verse 2, ayat 176, our panelists today will share with you more than 10 years of their research and on-the-ground work. Before that, let's warm up before our event proper. Please go to sli.do and enter ACF 2020. So there'll be 3 activities for us to engage on. Okay. So I'll give the participants 30 seconds to enter Slido. Or you can also scan the QR code above. All right. Okay. So the first one we'll have is what is allowed in Islam. If anyone can just enter, we'll just the words will just pop up in this screen. Okay, we'll just wait for a few seconds. Interest-free loans. Okay. 10 more seconds for some people to add their thoughts on what is allowed in Islam. Okay, I think we'll just stick to this interest-free loans. Okay, so for the next activity, we have the quiz. Okay, how does Islam, quiz, okay. Okay, what is not allowed in Islam? We have 40 seconds to answer. All right, okay. So, yes, so in Islam, riba, which is interest, maisir, gambling, and gharar, uncertainty, are not allowed in Islam in total. Okay, let's go for our last activity, just to warm up the participants. Okay, which entrepreneurial quote resonates with you the most? Okay, I want to start a business to help my community. I want to start a business, but I have no capital. I already have a business, but want to make it Islamic. I don't want anything to do with business. I don't want to start a business because I failed before. I already have a business and it is already prospering. I want to start a business, but I'm too scared of the risk. Okay, so most of it is I want to start a business to help my community. Okay, that's good. All right, so that ends our activity. All right, so let's go back to our speakers. Okay, so before we start, I'll just introduce to the audience the speakers. Mr. Akmal Hanuk is the founder and CEO of Assadaqaat Community Finance. He currently holds senior board level position in numerous public and private organizations, namely Ministry of Economy and Transport at Welsh Government, supporting entrepreneurial women in Wales, Business Wales Strategy Board. He's also a university business tutor in entrepreneurship, business strategy, and international business at Cardiff Business School, Cardiff University. A guest lecturer and keynote speaker on Islamic finance, he has spoken at leading academic institutions, international seminars, and conferences. Our second panelist is Dr. Jamal. Dr. Ahmad Jamal is who is a reader in marketing and strategy, and a deputy head of section, learning and teaching at Cardiff University Business School. His research interests include Islamic financial consumption and charitable donations in offline and online digital contexts. His work has appeared in scholarly journals such as Journal of Business Research, among others. He is also the co-author of Routledge Companion to Ethnic Marketing. He has presented his work at many international conferences around the world. Before we start, please be reminded to post your questions on the question and answer section of the webinar. If you do not have any questions, do vote for the questions you want answered. Without further ado, Mr. Akmal, make you the host, the co-host. Okay, Mr. Akmal, you are not the host.
Okay, thank you. So can you see my screen?
Yes, you can see your screen.
Thank you very much. Okay, so أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق وجعلني من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you very much, Brother Radwan. Thank you very much for the Islamic Finance Singapore group to organize this very important and vital webinar today. I'm equally very grateful to the participants. Dr. Jamal also is been working with me for last more than 10 years now, and together we have been able to achieve a lot of our vision and our work, so we will be happy to share with this today. We are constrained with time, but we will be looking at some of the key areas this morning or this afternoon. And although we will not be touching too much in detail, we would still like to have a brief sort of understanding of the agenda that what I've just put together. So we look at the landscape, what is the issue that we are going to address or we are addressing at the moment, what is our research findings, what is the way forward, the objectives of finance in general and objectives of Islamic finance in particular, what is the ethical framework for Islamic finance, the governance continuum, and introducing Sadaqaat, the practical side that what we have been doing over the last sort of 3 years. And this will allow us to open up for question and answers. Hopefully we should be able to take almost like around 35 to 40 minutes. But as I said, we will be going quickly to allow time for question and answers, and some of the areas that which we can't cover, hopefully we will cover in the Q&A. So as I said, it's a very vital, very important, I think the most key area which everyone in the world is looking, and mostly in the Islamic finance world as well. But people are looking at a solution, people are looking at the problem. So what is really the problem that we are facing? And it is, as you can see, very much everywhere. If we look at the press, if we look at the television screens, if we look anywhere, it is the global economic outlook. And I was just going through some of the research and I saw very stark figures, which I wanted to share with you. This is a sort of the troughs and peaks of the last 100 years that we have been having in terms of the finance. And this is an World Bank economic report starting from 1871 to 2021. And you can see that a lot of the recessions have come across, and all these peaks that you're seeing. but the top one has been the recent one, which is the COVID-19. So a lot of the countries, they are facing recessions. Every region is, substantial downgrading their forecasts. East Asia, Pacific, they will grow by only 0.5%. Southeast Asia will contract by 2.7%. Sub-Sahara Africa, 2.8%. Middle East and North Africa by 4.2%. So generally, the timing is just right to be talking about what we are going to discuss today. So this is the whole story. The second, again from the World Bank, again is how fast these growth projections have been reduced. So we saw in 1991, there's a huge a reduction in the stock crash and all that was going on. 2009, we saw the financial crisis. And now 2020, as you can see, the red line is drastically dropped down. So all the forecasts, all the areas that we have had, they're all showing very negative figures. So it's a really cause for concern. We looked at the IMF figures, and they are also talking about a very much a crisis which is never have been experienced in the world before. And the outlook was grim. Travel, tourism, industry, manufacturing, all sectors of the industries, they have been really hit. And what that meant is that because generally the people are not going to be having opportunities for financial growth, there is going to be a lot of layovers. There's a lot of going to be unemployment, people who would be not really needed because of the social distancing, because of the lack of travel, tourism. Strong fiscal support is warranted, but it has its own consequences. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, is also talking about the same reduction of areas that we are talking about. So that's the context that we are coming to talk to you about. And the backdrop of all this has been the continuous pre-COVID and the current post-COVID situation that we will be going into is about inequality. The biggest issue the world is facing today is the inequality. It is basically the difference between the rich and the poor. It is between the difference between the classes, between the opportunities. So there is a huge area of concern. And I'm just quoting Christine Lagarde. She was mentioning in the last Davos conference, and she mentioned that 85 richest people in the world control as much wealth as the poorest half of the global population, which is almost like 3.5 billion. Now, that's the scenario that we are coming and we are talking about, that what can we in Islamic finance do and what we can organize. So generally, just to conclude this section, before I hand over to Dr. Jamal, is basically we are talking about global economic disruption. There's a global crisis, there's pandemic, there's recession. And the key area that we have to look into is that this crisis highlights the need for urgent action to cushion the pandemic's health and economic consequences, protect vulnerable populations, and set a stage for lasting recovery. Now, obviously, this is coming out from the world organizations, politicians, policymakers, everyone. But the question is how? That's the main question. So we also did a lot of the work, and we found that what we did over the past years hasn't changed, but has actually started focusing our program, our vision, our work that has been done. So this, I would like to ask Dr. Jamal to share our major areas of development that we will be doing. And I'll just leave you with the quote with Michael Porter. He's one of the key professors in Harvard University, who is saying that a society that fails to address basic human needs, equip citizens to improve their quality of life, protect the environment, and provide opportunity for many of its citizens is not succeeding. So this is the sort of the background that we came across. And I would now like to ask Dr. Jamal to please share the findings that we have been working in the last couple of years. Over to you, Dr. Jamal.
جزاك الله خير. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. يا الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. My brothers and sisters, I want to start from a very interesting question which I've just spotted in a question and answer section. Somebody has asked this beautiful question, which is that I really want to know how to stop interest and riba in our community, both in terms of macro and micro level. Riba is really causing the inequality of wealth and income. So brother or sister, I fully agree with you. And our presentation today is going to talk about issues that we can do at community level to actually handle this issue of interest and what we can do in order to help each other, for example. So that's the focus of our presentation, inshallah. I work for Cardiff University. My background is in marketing and strategy. I have a specialist interest in understanding customers and their psychology and why people do certain things. For example, in the context of Islamic finance, obviously there are some number of questions that we're looking. So my journey, my presentation is more about sort of taking you through things that we did together with Akmal and Islamic Banking and Finance Center. And bear in mind that I'm talking back in time. So it's about 10 years ago, our journey started. So brother, if you go back to next slide. So we started off with a very fundamental question, because if you're talking about interest in the community and how we can solve it, obviously the obvious starting point comes to this issue of why Muslims actually are banking with conventional banks, and particularly in the context that in the UK at that time, and in some Islamic countries, as you know, we already have an option of Islamic banking. So if you have Islamic banking, some option to do and go to them, why do we continue to go to Islamic conventional banks, for example? So that's a very interesting question to look at. And then obviously, if there are any issues about lack of clarity about what Shariah actually compliance means, and in terms of understanding Islamic finance, whether people may say that we really don't understand the terminology, and why there is a lack of innovation, for example, why the Islamic banking industry, for example, is not solving the anxieties and the issues that we feel at a community level we have. So this was the starting point for our research. And so brother, next slide. So we had started with an academic approach to understanding the phenomena. Our focus at that time was to understand Islamic financial consumption, because from there we were hoping to come up with an alternative model of helping and solving the problems that the community is facing. So we started with the focus groups which lasted about 1.5 hours, for example. We recruited Muslims from the community. We made sure that they were from different cultural backgrounds, because every culture has a different interpretation and understanding of these issues. We looked at professionals and different people with different educational background, including people who are doing business. So we also looked at people who had microfinance needs, and they're running their business and they want to sort of understand, how can I run my business from an Islamic point of view? And we also make sure that there was a balance in terms of gender. So we included both males and females. Akmal? So what do we find? At that time, what we found very interesting, that everybody we spoke to is looking for something they call Islamic. So they're looking for really authentic Islamic finance enterprise. And so there is when we realize that people are talking about a lot of needs So they have a lot of financial needs, for example. They have a need for home finance. They have a need for refurbishing their home. They want their daughters and sons to be married. They have some savings they want to invest from an Islamic point of view. They have children. Their children are going to universities. They want to fund their education, for example. They want to have business. They are running businesses, that they want to solve the problems that they are facing in terms of cash. So there are a lot of things that this new enterprise actually can do for this Muslim community, because the Muslims have these needs, for example. Another feature that came out of these focus group sessions was that Muslim as a community, whatever that Islamic enterprise comes into existence, they're looking for that enterprise to play a role in sort of handling social issues, sort of in terms of inequality, for example, in the community, handling some economic issues, for example, like poverty, for example, what sort of things you're doing to reduce poverty in the community, and how can you develop the community? Because if you think about an Islamic enterprise, these issues come to your mind. You cannot be an Islamic unless you take care of community. You take care of the community needs in terms of their social, economic, and community level needs, for example. This came up very strongly in the findings. And very interestingly, people are still using, a significant majority of people, they still use conventional banks. And what do we learn from there is that they're looking for an Islamic enterprise who can be trustworthy, because they see the conventional banks as very trustworthy. So you put your money there, you can save your money, and you don't have any problem with that. You trust them. You also feel that the conventional banks are very reliable. And also they are top quality institutions, so they don't actually have any problem in terms of service quality. So when you create an alternative enterprise from an Islamic perspective, they have to meet these benchmarks. They have to be trustworthy, they have to be reliable, and they have to give me a top quality service, for example. So I'm not going to compromise on these issues. They were also looking for complete transparency, for example. So when you look at Islamic banks, people have a number of questions. So they were asking questions, to what extent these Islamic finance institutions, they actually care more about me as a community and more about their shareholders, for example. Do they mix conventional funds with Islamic and Shariah based funding, for example? Do they ever make a loss, or is it just a glossing up of terminology and they're just trying to target me because I have this Islamic consciousness and I want to actually live my life according to Islamic values? And from there, a lot of people that we spoke about, they spoke of a very high level of anxiety, a very high level of guilt as well. So although they are banking with conventional banking, but they have this guilt feeling, which makes them sort of a lot of trouble psychologically terms. So they're not feeling at ease in psychological terms. So there is a need. When they talk about Islamic banks as an institution, they feel that these banks are actually very rigid in terms of delivery of products and services. For example, they have too much paperwork, too much procedures to follow. Whereas you walk into a conventional bank, it's so easy to do everything. Here you find everything very rigid. You also find quite complicated terminologies like mudareba, musharaka, which normal common people don't understand. They're not sure about quality assurance and control and how does that work in Islamic finance industry. Very common feature was that when I walk into Islamic bank, the staff is not properly trained. They don't deal with me in an Islamic way, for example. The services, for example, they expect, because they're comparing with conventional banks, so they are expecting everything to be available at convenience. So I want service to be available at my door front. Now, if you don't live in the UK, you probably don't understand this, that the Islamic banks are not everywhere. So they are in certain cities, they're in certain localities. So if you live far away, it's very difficult for you to bank with them. And obviously conflicting messages from scholars, which confuses the community. And they're thinking about Islamic finance and what solutions they can offer to help grow the community, for example. And then one of my students is also in the participants, Akila, and she did a beautiful study under my supervision on motivations to donate. Her work was on charitable donations, and we published this work in one of the very good journals, Journal of Business Research. And it's my first ever research which has spoken about Muslims in the mainstream. So to think about mainstream academic literature, so we are presenting these issues to them because we want food for thinking. So here we are talking about Muslims and why do they donate, for example, because we feel that from a community perspective, there is something to do with this issue of sadaqat that Islam emphasizes. There's so much donations we donate. So we'll look into this paper. I'll share something with you. One of the key insights that we got from, obviously this research is in the context of UK, where do Muslims donate, how much they donate, for example. So Akmal Bhai, if you show the next slide, very interestingly, that Muslims living in the UK, they are very charitable and they support a range of issues, for example. So on the left side, you will see UK, like animal causes, children causes, families, elderly, homeless people. There are a lot of issues. And if you look at the international dimension, people live here, but they support everything back home, for example, even at international level. So if you come from Malaysia and you live in the UK, you may be supporting a lot of causes from Palestine, from Syria, and that is what is happening. But common to these both is a community cause, that we are actually trying to help community. So this idea that I want to help the community is very much ingrained in our psychology. And alhamdulillah, we're doing very well. So there is a huge potential from coming up from our perspective. We want to get rid of riba. We want to come up with an Islamic enterprise. So where this has to come? Well, it has to come from somewhere here, because there is so much potential here that people are donating and they're very sort of conscious and they want to help people around. So why don't they help themselves? That's the big question we are going to answer today. Akmal Bhai? And as you know, as Muslims, we donate because we want to have ajr and reward in the hereafter. We are obviously trying to follow the role models, which are Prophet ﷺ and his life and his sunnah. We want to follow the guidance. But very interesting point, which is coming from an Islamic enterprise perspective, is that Muslims, they want to donate to those charities which resembles Islam, or they do something Islamic. So in the same way as Islamic banks were benchmarked, here you have some benchmark, which is that I want to work with a charity which is like me, which endorses my values. So my values are Islamic, they need to be Islamic as well. Akbar Bhai? So that gives us opportunity for us to think about an alternative model, something different, something not based on conventional banking, for example, which can handle financial exclusion, which can handle inequality in the community and in the society, which can look into social economic opportunities that a lot of our youth have, for example. They come out of the universities, they have talent, but they don't have finance. So how can we support them? Because they have nowhere to go from an Islamic perspective, for example. And a lot of our communities, particularly in the West, the literature says that they sort of face poverty issues as well. So how can we reduce poverty through Islamic finance principles, but coming up with an alternative Islamic enterprise perspective? Akbar Bhai? So if you look at why not come up with an Islamic finance or Islamic banking model? Well, the problem with any bank or any business enterprise, if you like, is that they normally are driven by shareholders. So they create value for customers, clients, but they also create value for shareholders. And this struggle between that, yes, I have an Islamic community, I need to serve them, but I have to make profit. That's a big tension. So you get the funding from investors, and you have to make sure that you give them proper return on investment. And that is a big tension, because when Islamic banks, they try to do that, they end up inflating the prices, for example. They offer you product and services. I mean, in the UK, for example, we have this experience of premium charging, for example, because they're looking into the interest of shareholders. So a new model a new alternative enterprise has to get rid of this thinking that we have shareholders, we have investors. No, we have to think about something else. And that's something as Akmal Bhai will talk about, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Ahmed Bhai, thank you so much for this very insightful research. You've really, been working together, and especially I'm glad to hear that Akila is joining in as well, because I think this is the kind of the research that we were always looking for, to have that empirical evidence, because it is so important for us as coming from the Islamic community, that's this kind of a research which has got real ground level, grassroots level areas of working and aspirations that we try to help them to develop this. So coming back to the research, I'm conscious about the time. The next sort of 15 minutes, I will just be talking to you about some of the principles and areas that we wanted to share with you, because we are now armed with a lot of knowledge, information in terms of research. So it is not something that we have just started thinking that it will grow. Inshallah, this area of work, the ACF work and vision, is first of its kind and based on empirical evidence, based on clear-cut aspirations of the people. So I was very fascinated with this quote from Einstein, and it says that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So basically, when we are looking at the conventional side of finance and the banking side and the problems that we are, that is one of the reasons why we are not really thinking about an out-of-the-box solution, anything about innovation. So this is where we are wanting to look at, and we had almost like more than 20 years of our work in terms of unlocking the principles of Islamic financial system and presenting it as a viable alternate. It is a very genuine endeavor to be not able to go with the banking side and changing terminologies and changing areas where people still are very confused, as Dr. Jamal mentioned, with the terminologies, with the opaqueness of the products and services. We were trying to look at that, what is exactly what people want, and then equally to look at what Islamic finance is talking about. So when I looked at the history of finance, and we start with the modern day economics, Adam Smith being the author, and I found very interesting things over there as well. And when we are looking at objectives of finance, he is talking about to feel much for others and little for ourselves, to restrain our selfishness and exercise our benevolent affections, constitute the perfection of our human nature. So when we are talking about from an Islamic perspective as a human nature, as Dr. Jamal also mentioned in his paper and in his research alongside Akila, was that, and we did a lot of work on that to be able to understand the value of giving, the human nature, that what inspires that. And I think this is what Adam Smith is conquering as well. Another, I don't know if some of you might have heard about Professor Michael Sandel. He is one of the key areas in economics and fairness and justice. And what he is coming up, he's also a professor in Harvard, to say that the purpose of finance is to direct capital towards socially useful purposes. And that's the real economy. So when we were looking at the conventional side, but how far we have gone, and when we were looking at the Islamic finance, these are the objectives that we came across in terms of Islamic finance is concerned. So when we are looking at Islamic finance, we are talking about a fair and equitable distribution of resources. That's the first point that we need to think about. We also need to look at establishing a socio-economic justice. That means closing the gap between the rich and the poor, and the opportunities having the people that they can actually obtain to be able to make their futures better. Moral and material growth, again, it has got with ethical and governance and ethics. So that is very important. But the most important is circulation of wealth. The objectives of Islamic finance is to make sure that the finance that anybody has been blessed by or who has been more privileged than others circulates the wealth in the community. And these are the major principles for objectives of Islamic finance. We all know the major prohibitions. And basically, I mean, in that small quiz that you mentioned, people mentioned about riba, about interest, about speculation, about gharar. And basically, mesir and gharar and riba are the key major areas. So, but equally is the unethical behavior as well, that, you know, in terms of the fraud, in terms of the transparency, in terms of exploitation. These are all areas which constitute the ethical value, as we are talking about. But when we are looking at the ethical framework of Islamic finance, we are talking very much about benevolence. Our Prophet ﷺ has been Rahmat al-Alameen. And basically what we are talking about is that benevolence is the key value for Islamic finance. If we don't have benevolence, ayah after ayah when we are talking about finance is to help the people when they are in need, to give them time when they need it, to even just forgive it as a charity if we want to. The qard can even be forgiven as a charity. So benevolence is the key area that we are looking at. Accountability, both in in this world and the hereafter, is another ethical framework, a very key framework. Common good, the maroof that is there. But the important one is the stewardship, that we are trustees of whatever we have in this world. So that's a very important area that we need to look at. In terms of the governance continuum, it ranges between the conformance and the performance. As far as conformance is concerned, of course, it has to be Sharia compliant, it has to be accountable, the financial reporting that we have to do, all the new IFRS standards, the regulatory standards, whatever. So all those conformance is there. But if we only have conformance and have no performance, we are not really achieving what we are wanting to do. So basically, it has to range between conformance and performance needs to be in the value creation and the social responsibility. So that's something, you know, Islamic finance has to do things, and that's what we came across. So what we have done is that I'll look at the Islamic finance value proposition. So when we look at the value proposition, it is universal. So all those things that what I have mentioned to you in the ethical framework and the conformance is universal. It is, the core principle is that it's sharing of resources between the haves and have-nots, and the research has proved this. And also the key main feature from Islamic finance point of view is the risk and reward sharing and redistribution of wealth. Now, these are the key areas that we need to concentrate whenever we are developing a product or a service. So basically what we are looking at is a solution which can have that ethical framework, which will have the areas of compliance that we are talking about, and it is based on a divine principle. So the area that we looked at when we started Assadaqaat Community Finance, ACF, was to offer interest-free, inclusive, and innovative economy. And the principle for this has been based on what Brother Ridwan mentioned earlier on, in Surah Baqarah, ayah 276, Yamhaq Allahul riba wa yurbi as-sadaqat. Allah will deprive usury of all the blessings, but will give increase for the deeds of charity. The whole principle of ACF is standing on this principle, because in the whole of the Quran, when we were looking into the establishing this, we looked at the instruments that we could use, and sadaqat becomes the key instrument in terms of the ethical framework, in terms of what we are wanting to do, because it is cross-cutting to what people can share and benefit in the conditions that we have. So when we started, we almost like 3 years ago, we wanted to develop an end-to-end groundbreaking and innovative, financial innovative position or project, which could offer interest-free finance and debt-free financing. Now, we all know that when people are looking to start their businesses, they're actually looking to have cost of financing as one of the key area, which is based on interest, and also the worry about debt. So when we looked at the instrument of Sadaqaat, this gives us that total freedom of interest-free and debt-free financing. So this is an excellent project or excellent instrument that we started to use and did this research to be able to look at the micro, small, and medium enterprise. And this is like a level 1 program. So we thought that it would be great to have a platform, which we have a secure platform for the people, because we all give sadaqat in different areas. And Dr. Jamal mentioned earlier on the causes that we are doing, but you will see that enterprise has never been a cause. This is the first instrument that we are using as an instrument to help develop entrepreneurship. And that is because, again, when we read the ayahs of Surah Baqarah, trade is being blessed by Allah. Tijara is blessed by Allah. So when we put the tijara and sadaqat together, we become a really a solution to the world's problems that I mentioned earlier on. So our major area is transformation of beneficiaries into benefactors. People who have the privilege to share, we can offer that platform. We can give that platform, and the opportunity for people to donate their sadaqat. And we have got a complete platform, a banking platform, to be able to give it to these beneficiaries. So it's a very useful program that we are sharing with a number of people in UK, but we will be expanding internationally because this is a global proposition. So our first program is for the micro, small, and medium enterprise, but the second tier 2 is for equity financing. We also found in our research that there's a lots of people who are keeping money in the bank, maybe 5,000 pounds, 10,000 pounds, or maybe in Singapore dollars or American dollars or wherever they have. So basically, that is not enough to start a business. So the tier 2 program is basically on equity investment. And it is basically based on the risk sharing, profit and loss. So any of the projects in agriculture, in education, in infrastructure, in micro or macro economy, in manufacturing, in IT, in medical, health, social care, agriculture, whatever they want to do, we will be bringing a number of projects, both in terms of real estate as well, so that people can invest in this opportunity and take their share on equity basis. Excuse me. And then we've got a complete range of education training for people who want to start their businesses and want to get onto the business side of things. Our general area of is recruitment and selection. We normally have community events. We do number of organizations, both national and international organization. And we are developing a lot of programs with women entrepreneurship, people in the community. We educate them, we train them, and then we bring them into a level where they can start their own businesses, but then become a benefactor as well. So basically, they can start as a beneficiary of people who want to start their businesses, but the benefactors, they keep on giving us their donations and sadaqat, which we can use for giving interest-free finance. But then once they have already started doing well in their business, it is all done on the basis of affordability. It is not based on interest. So whatever, if they want to pay 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 50 pounds, 100 pounds a month, whatever their business can afford, they can still bring it back and become the members to be helping other people who are joining in as well. So this model is a very successful model to be able to look at Sadaqat as an instrument. We also understood that opening a bank account is very difficult, and especially people with no credit history and people with perhaps not a very good history. So we developed our change account card with one of the key supplies or key um, uh, areas of offering debit card, and this is a MasterCard account with the change account. So we are helping people to open up their bank account and sort code, which could act as their business account. So this not only gives us that security to understand where the money is going, but they can also be using it as an ATM or wherever they would like to have. So there's number of areas that people can use in terms of paying tickets or travel or shopping or whatever. So it is a basic debit card. There is a monthly fee for just covering the essential fees, the statutory fee, and they can use this card anywhere. Now, in terms of importance of Sadaqat, I would just like to leave a few hadiths of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that spending and not counting. So lest Allah counts against you. Do not withhold your money, lest Allah withholds from you. Spend what you can. And it is quoted in Bukhari and Muslim. Another hadith is the Lord's commandment for every one of his slaves is to spend on others, and I will spend on you. And this research also confirms what Dr. Jamal mentioned, is that we always think that, okay, we have always heard that Sadaqat never decreases your income. And this is exactly that research confirming that every time people are giving to Sadaqat, they are getting more in return. And this is, as we know, that a research which is very unique that we have done to be able to confirm the saying of the Prophet ﷺ. And when we are talking about Sadaqat, it does not mean that it has to be so many £1,000 or £1,000,000 or whatever. Yes, some of the people are blessed and privileged, so they can share that with as much as they want, but it can only be a smile to a brother. It can be a good word to a brother. Removing a stone, a thorn on the path that may hurt somebody is a charity. So guidance, like for example, we all think that only money is charity, but it's a guidance and advice is also a charity. So the charity and the instrument of Sadaqat is basically what we feel is the way forward. And we have tested, we have made this instrument, and we have worked on this instrument, and we are going further into looking at expanding the program as it is. So in terms of the next steps, people who are in the seminar or webinar today, or family, friends, whoever wants to join, they can join as a benefactor. You can go to our website and donate and be part of the organization as a benefactor. You could also join as a beneficiary, and to starting your own micro, small, or medium enterprise. There is a whole eligibility criteria and what are the needs that we need to do. At the moment, it is limited to UK, but in the couple of months, once we are expanding our program, we will be looking at Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, all those different areas that we can look into to be able to help and develop this program as one of the viable alternates into it. So the final thoughts from my side, and I'm conscious about time, is that the solution is through sharing and working for the common good, the maroof that we know. And it is basically from sharing our donations, our sadaqat, and our time and efforts together. And it will help us all to develop the new program or the new sort of viable alternate that we are all are thriving to do that. I'm just quoting one of my professors that I've been talking with, and he has been my mentor to be able to understand this concept of sadaqat as well. And I'm just quoting him to say that the only way to diminish interest or riba is to strengthen and institutionalize the instrument of sadaqat in Islamic finance. And I think it goes back to the question which Dr. Jamal mentioned in terms of the audience, that how can we reduce or eliminate riba? And Allah has given us the ayah that I've quoted you. It's basically to institutionalize the instrument of sadaqat with reliability, with transparency, with the simplicity of the product, and to be able to meet the needs of our populations worldwide, whether it is Islamic communities or other communities, because the whole principle is universal. So I'd like to thank you all. I especially want to thank our brothers from the Islamic Finance Group in Singapore, Ethis as well, who have organized that. And I don't know if we have time for a 3-minute video, but we can skip Ridwan if we were eating up time for question and answers. So,
we can show your video, Mr. Akmal, if you have the video.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just get back to you on that.
Okay, so from my side, I think just some briefing for the audience. If you have any questions, just post the questions on the Q&A section and then direct it to Mr. Akmal or Dr. Ahmad Jamal here. And then we'll be channeling your questions to the respective speakers. But for myself, while waiting for the question to load up and for the audience to just think of some questions, maybe I can just ask one question first. Mr. Akmal, I think from a finance perspective, because I'm also a finance student in university, I would like to ask then with regards to SME, right? There's also the SME financing risk. The probability of them not being able to pay up, that's very much a concern for banks and financial institutions when giving them loans. So how does this benevolent loan concept solves this financial risk that we are taking as financial institutions?
I think it's a very good question. Do you want me to answer now, or should I go with the video, or maybe we can?
I think we can go for the video first.
Okay. So I'll see if I can get this. Does this work?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let me play. Can you hear the sound?
What if the people who are privileged helped our communities? What if we used our generosity to help others start up their enterprises? What if entrepreneurs could get finance based on ethical values of justice and fairness? What if you could get business finance without worrying about high interest payments? The financial crisis of 2008 had a major impact on our communities. It was a global crisis that still affects ordinary people. We bailed out the banks to the tune of £141 billion. But our communities are facing big cuts and austerity measures. In the UK, 21% of the population live in poverty. 3 to 7 million households use high-cost credit. The problem is bigger than we think. Many people in our communities are facing financial exclusion. Too many people face poverty and inequality due to a lack of financial support. What if there's a better way? An alternative and viable financial system to the one that we currently have. One that's inclusive, ethical, and fair. One that is transparent, empathetic, socially responsible, and sustainable. One that promotes the well-being of our future generations without the burden of debt. One that promotes community collaboration and shared prosperity. One that is based on benevolence and working for the common good. One that helps entrepreneurs to start micro, small and medium enterprises, helping them to grow and prosper by taking an innovative new approach to financial inclusion. A better way through providing no-interest business finance and offering professional support. A way to start a business that is fairer and better than the traditional system. Assadaqaat Community Finance is a better way for sharing and working for the common good. We can all thrive together. To find out more about how you can start new enterprises and build better communities, visit us at www.assadaqaatcommunityfinance.co.uk.
Okay, so hopefully this is something that just completes overall what I have been saying. But coming back to the question, Ridwan, I think in terms of the risk, you know, because that is why I think what we were saying earlier on, that the financial institutions or the banks, because the risk sharing is not there. It is basically, you know, making it very difficult for them to be able to use any instrument that they are using, and hence the ACF model is something that we have got risk covered in the sense that people who will perhaps be starting their businesses, they may go pear-shaped, but we are working on the principle of profit and loss. And if the business is making money, they are giving us, they are donating as Assadaqaat, as benefactors. But if the business is not making money at that point in time, obviously they are going to do some new business as well, or maybe do something. So they can still keep donating to the ACF model, that the financial model that we are doing. So it keeps them in the community so that they can share, even if they start to work at some place for some years, you know, and they get into employment, they can still pay 10, 15, 20, 30 pounds as sadaqat. So to come to your question is that the banks and financial institution, if we are going with their risk level and things, they cannot do what we can do. So that's where that whole innovative process is there.
I get you, I understand. Okay, let's move on to some of the questions by the audience. Okay, so does community-based financing, is community-based financing similar to crowdfunding, or are there any differences? So for example, I think what this person is referring to is when crowdfunding, there's also sort of a guarantor or guarantee by the business. For example, in Singapore, we have Capital Boost, which does SME financing for or invoice financing for some businesses. So they have sort of a guarantee and some purchase order to guarantee that there's also a payment channel coming into the business. So what are your thoughts on this, Mr. Akmal or Dr. Ahmad?
I think financing or crowd funding is a few platforms that people are using, but in the main, generally they are based on interest. There are some which are based on equity, but again, the people who start the crowdfunding, they are generally, they have to either pay back or there is a bit of a percentage they have to forego in terms of whoever is starting that crowdfunding. So in the main, crowdfunding is a way that people are using for financing some of things. Firstly, that it is not as an institution, it can go for general social enterprise projects, and there could be some crowdfunding, but when we are looking at serious businesses of manufacturing, of development, IT, agriculture, all that, it cannot be as a crowdfunding. It has to be more than that in terms of an institutional equity financing regime that we have to look at. And that has to be, and we've got those, we've got Musharaka as an instrument, we've got Mudarba as an instrument, but these are all risk sharing instruments. So that's what we are planning, because then it really reduces the risks to one party, but shares the risks with everyone. So everyone shares the risk and everyone shares the reward.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. There's a participant from India. Her name is Aisha. She asks, how do we implement this in a country where government regulations do not support this since we are a minority? Dr. Ahmad or Mr. Akmal?
Ahmed Bhai, you want to respond or?
I think you can go ahead. It's straightforward,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I think, yeah, this is a very good question, because cross-border and cross-border jurisdictions, regulations, they are very different. However, I think generally in terms of the banking side as well, one area that we are concentrating is the organizations who would like to practice corporate social responsibility. So there are a number of organizations, a number of blue chip organizations, leading organizations, which we could look at that. And if they want to, because there are some banking regulations from, let's say, if we are talking about India, we're talking about Central Bank of India policy, all the financial policies. So there are some areas that we are coming into in terms of the corporate social responsibility. So a lot of the people, a lot of the organizations who want to do something for the community, because the accounting principles now are also changing. They are looking at SDGs, they are looking at ESGs, the environmental and social policies, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals for the World Bank, and all countries are signing up to that. So there are a number of opportunities which can be looked into. Of course, they have to be in line with the compliance of that local country. Singapore, India, Malaysia, Pakistan, Turkey, UK, Europe. So all of that. But what I'm trying to say is that this COVID situation has brought up a lot of stark realities. So the structures that people are using will have this opportunity for us. From an Islamic point of view, it's a very straightforward instrument. That's not an issue. But having it regulated, because I know for sure that we also went through this to be able to make sure that we are complying with the UK FCA and PTA regulation. So there are areas that we can help if people want to start in India. And I think that's what the whole area of this webinar is, that to be able to share with people. And if people want to start as an ACF model, then we could look into and help to give our expertise and vision and the work that we have done to shortcut some of the areas. And it could become an ACF India or ACF Singapore or whatever we want to call it.
Understand. Hopefully that could be a very near future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay, there's one question from Mr. Abdul Majid. Based on interest fee, is there a possibility for Qard Al Hassan to be used as an instrument to finance micro enterprise? Because I think Qard Al Hassan and this benevolent loan that you are proposing is actually seems to be similar. If you can correct me on this. So
Okay.
what are your thoughts on this? Is the Qard Al Hassan and this benevolent loan sort of the same, or are there big differences for us to actually finance these micro enterprises?
Okay, it's a very good question. We've got when we looked at developing which instrument to use, because obviously we had to be Sharia compliant and making sure that we do things in the right way. What we found was that we've got four financial instruments. Our first basic instrument for financing is zakat. And obviously zakat has got a nisab, it has got a qualification, it really makes sure that who are the deserving people for zakat. So it's basic safety net, an instrument which we've got zakat. The second instrument that we've got is qard, which is loan. And loan is that, for example, if I need £100 today and I go to Dr. Jamal to say that, Brother Jamal, I want to borrow £100 and I can pay you at the end of the month when my salary comes. So it's time barred. It has got a fixed term. It has got condition that once my salary comes in, then I will return this £100. The third instrument is Qard Hasana, which was just mentioned with Brother Majid, I think, who asked the question. And the Qard Hasana is that the same scenario which I need this £100. I go to my brother Jamal and ask him to loan me £100. So he kindly gives this to me, and I say to him that, Brother Jamal, I have a salary coming in, but I'll pay you back once at the end of the month, once my salary comes back. But he happens to know my circumstances. He's known my family. He's a very close friend. And he understands that although I have an intent to do it, I have some other issues which are at the moment taking more priority than paying this £100 back. So Brother Jamal very kindly says to me that, okay, you don't worry about this £100. I know there are certain other issues that you have to take care of. You take care of them. Pay me when you can. So what he has done by Qard Hasana is that he's given me that time factor to be able to pay when I can afford it. It could be after 2 months, 3 months, or whenever I can, to be able, once I've addressed the issue, to pay this back. So once that is being done, but I have not been absolved of my debt. That's the area that we need to look at, that I still owe him even till the day of Qiyamah, that if I don't pay this debt back, I still owe him. Unless he himself forgives or gives, as Allah mentions, as charity. So that gives us the fourth instrument, which is sadaqat. And this is the beautiful instrument which Allah is saying, that if you give charity, if you give sadaqat, if you give all and don't ask for any return, then you will find the return when you come to me at the day of judgment. That's the beauty of sadaqah. That's the value of sadaqah. So that's why we use this top quality instrument to be able to use that. There's a lots of organizations who are using Karde Hasana, which is fine. But again, that is again from a debt. We wanted to create what is in the Surah Al-Baqarah, to be able to say that if you are wanting to get riba eliminated, the only solution is sadaqat. And that's why we are using this instrument from Sadaqat point of view, which is across the board. You know, it does not have any limitation. It is basically giving from what Allah has given us. And we expect the reward from Allah at the end when we go and join Him there at the Day of Judgment, inshallah.
Inshallah, I understand what you just shared. I'll move on to another question. Okay, I mean, from my side, I think we have heard a lot of professors, doctors, and also finance professionals talk about promote this risk sharing initiative for businesses and also financial institutions. For example, Dr. Abbas Mirakrov in ISRA, and then also Mr. Iqbal Khan from the Fajar Capital. He was also saying that we should do a fund that we can to promote this sort of equity-based funds that can finance these SMEs and then also infrastructure. But why is it that it's actually been very slow for Islamic finance to take up this sort of risk-sharing initiative?
I think it goes back to the research which Dr. Jamal mentioned, because the risk sharing, you see, it is inherent. When you're looking at the banking structure, it is inherent that they are risk averse. So it has to be an instrument and an organizational like us to actually look at that kind of funding. That's the innovation part that we are talking about. Because banks can do, and they are doing whatever they're doing, so that's fine. But if we are looking at the Islamic finance, that's why I mentioned to you the ethical framework, I mentioned to you the governance structure, I mentioned to you the conditions. When we are looking at the sort of the holistic view of Islamic finance, then these are the instruments that we can use. I mean, I know, you know, Professor Mirakhor as well. I know Brother Iqbal Khan, you know, we've been discussing things. But basically, when we are looking at the instruments that we are using and the way we are looking at entrepreneurship, that's the key. You see, because Allah has given tijara 9/10 of barakah. From an Islamic perspective, tijara, entrepreneurship, enterprise, self-employment, these are all very important areas. And if we look at our history for the last 1500 years, you'll see that a lot of the people, even the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, you know, all the Azwaj Mutarat, you know, like Hazrat Khatija, for example, Hazrat Usman, Abdurrahman bin Auf, all of these people who have been the top business people. But what was common to them was that they kept whatever was needed for their families, but then the rest was all sadaqat. And this is the way, if we look at inspiration, this is the way we have been doing as traders. And this is the way we have been sharing our blessings that Allah has been giving us. And hence, I think that the fund or whatever it is being created, but from us, as far as we are concerned, we are giving this opportunity to donate the sadaqat for enterprise that we are specializing in.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Akmal. Just have
Brother,
some few questions.
Dr. Jamal, would you like to add something?
Yes.
Anything from the research? Thank you.
Okay, I just have some few more questions because let's stick to two more questions. One from the pre-webinar questions, and then maybe last one can be from the Q&A section for the participants who are still in this webinar. So I think there's a bit of a concern in terms of how does this financing work. For example, in conventional banks, there's contracts. Even in Islamic banks, there's contracts. So, and then also again the financing risk for the capital, the guarantee, the guarantor, or a purchase order. That's for the conventional and even for Islamic finance, which they have implemented. But then, so for the Assadaqaat Community Finance, how does this entrepreneurs, when they go for financing from Assadaqaat Community Finance, are there any contracts that they have to abide to, any laws or rules, regulations?
Yeah, a very good question. And you see, this is why we have put so much time and effort in developing a complete platform, a banking finance platform, which has got all the terms and conditions. But these are terms and conditions which are very, very basic. You know, as Dr. Jamal mentioned in his research, you know, we are very much driven by what we found in our research work. And we found that people wanted simple contracts. People wanted generally very understandable terms. There is a whole education and training, as you saw in my presentation, a whole section of education and training. So we help the people to understand that why they are being given this financing and how they are going to return back. We are looking at 2 references. We are looking at, obviously, ID papers to be able to make sure that the people are genuine, all that. You see, because all of this, we are doing it to gain that trust of our donors, of the people who are giving us sadaqah. You see, we are, it has been a big challenge for us to sustain ourselves and create a proper image of a corporate financial entity. Now, this stays in between what we think ACF is right in the middle. On the top is the banks, and some of the banks, they have got their eligibility criteria, and there are people who are eligible for that criteria. That means that they can meet some, their credit history, the money that they have, things like that. So they are happy with the banks, and the banks are happy with them. The bottom of the pyramid is people who are really struggling, and the charity sector is taking care of them. So, you know, they are people we hope that we will uplift them into that kind of the pyramid. But when we are looking at our middle of the pyramid, which is almost like 50, 60% of the population, that is where the struggle is. That's where people are struggling with the income. That's where people are struggling with the opportunity. And that's where people, they want to have additional funds, but they cannot really get those funds. So generally, when we are looking at the ACF model, it is anything in between. We are staying in the middle of being a charity and being a professional banking institution. But what we are doing is, as Dr. Jamal mentioned, the empathy and compassionate to be understanding our community and not be strict and rigid, but equally use the banking platforms and the tools that we need to be able to make sure that we get that trust and security and the transparency of the people who are actually giving us the donations as benefactors or taking out as beneficiaries. For example, there is a whole statement that is going to be, that we are creating for the people who have taken, let's say if they have taken £1,000 and the contract is to pay this back according to the affordability in 24 months or 30 months, then if they are paying £30 every month, then we are giving them a statement to say that this is what has been received and this is what is the balance. And there is no like red letters going out from us to say that your home is at risk if you don't pay within the next 3 months. or there is going to be a penalty that it is not. It's basically understanding their situation, that empathetic, that compassionate, that true meaning of the verse, that which Allah says in the Surah Baqarah, that when your debtor is in trouble, give them time. This is exactly what we are trying to portray. This is why we are trying to practice all this, which sometimes the banks and the financial institutions, they can't. So it's a whole paradigm shift. It's a whole new area that we are developing. And we are hoping that the young people, they can understand what we are trying to do and support, and so that we can develop this as a whole viable alternate finance, which is based on the value proposition of Islamic finance.
Insane. Thank you so much for your explanation on how these banks and the financing risk and compared between conventional finance, Islamic banks, and also Assadaqaat Community Finance. I just have one last question before we wrap up. I mean, there are several websites that actually promote this sort of investors or for example, companies such as Indiegogo, where they put where they set up campaigns, and then, for example, if you there's a bicycle that is that they are planning to produce, and then after that they show why the bicycles are good, example, and then after that, when these people who visit the website and then see the copywriting, the why is it that the product is very good, and then they after that they put the money in that sort of project, and then in return they might be able to get a sort of their own bike or their own props or something else. So is this something that could be Islamic in the future, where even if they don't pay, at least they are actually getting something in return?
I don't know about this example that you mentioned. Maybe I'll need to look into it and see, to make sure that I can answer this. But I think there is generally, I think what I would like to ask Dr. Jamal to join in from a marketing ethics point of view, because there is a number of areas we also find that people come up with different kinds of incentives and things like that. And sometimes from an ethical side, especially from an Islamic ethical point of view, whether or not they are coherent with what they want to do. So maybe a few words from the marketing side is very important as well.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Akbar Bhai, I think it goes back to the same point, which is that probably we need to look at what these options are and exactly how do they operate, for example. So it's difficult to comment without looking into the specific mechanisms that they use, for example. But as a general principle, you're right. I mean, we, as you know, in Islamic marketing perspective, we have a generic rule that we do not cheat or deceive anybody. So there should be no deception, whether it's the beneficiary or whether it's the benefactor, for example, or whatever reward they are expecting, for example, whatever terms and conditions they set out, it should be according to Islamic law, for example. So that's the generic comment I think I can make at this stage without knowing the details of what brother is actually asking. But a few points and reflections from what you have been saying. I think we distinguish, I think one of the defining features of our model is the use of sadaqah. So if you think about this as an instrument, it does not come with same obligation that you have if you get money from an investor. That's the key difference. So if you get a money from investor, the investor is asking for return. And they want a fair return, for example. They may expect a return over a period of time. And that may happen whatever way they want to project it, for example. But sadaqah is, as brother said, is a very beautiful instrument. It gives us a lot of scope for us to do things and the flexibility that we want. So we want to be empathetic. We want to be flexible with the beneficiary. We want to understand their situation. We don't want to impose ourselves. If they don't pay us back, we are running after them, like chasing them as banks do or other investors do. We didn't want to have that sort of thing. And I think the beautiful solution came from Assadaqaat, because these people have donated us for the sake of Allah. They have trusted us. They have put a trust on us. Obviously, we're using some benchmarks. We are using criteria, as brother said. We are using some like same as banks do, for example. We have a criteria to evaluate people, for example, and they come to us and somebody says, I have a need to start a new, for example, pharmacy, because I'm a pharmacist. I just graduated and I need this much money, for example. So we can use some eligibility criteria. We can use some common sense. And we actually fundamentally, we are relying on something which is called common good. Because in the human nature, if you have 100 people, you can argue that there may be 70 people who would run away with your money, but there are still 30 people who are honest, and they come to you with equally honest desire to pay you back. They're not going to cheat you. So in every society, you have this proportion. So we are trusting on that sort of goodwill that people, like for example, there is some people say that if you give it to a woman, for example, of a household, it's more likely that she will pay you back. Similarly, the youth, for example, in Islamic youth, I have a lot of trust with Islamic youth, that the younger generation, to me, they are very, alhamdulillah, Islamically conscious, and they have a very clear consciousness in their hearts. They have very clean hearts, for example, but they need money, for example, to do little things. So we can remove that barrier of suspicion. And also we need to be more flexible with them. And I could only do that if we have sadaqah, because every other form of financing, it imposes us, it restricts us. As I was saying, shareholders, if you have that sort of thing, you are limited. You can do certain things, but you can't do other things. And I think in our model, we have the flexibility to do more, inshallah. The issue is to be fair and honest and to be transparent and to show people how we are collecting money, how we are actually assessing it, and where the money is actually going. That's the system we have developed. To be transparent, to show people, to showcase. The beneficiary can showcase their work. Once they get training from us, they can start their business, they can showcase their work with us. Our platform will be flexible enough to accommodate their showcasing. They can showcase, hey, I got this money from this ACF. I was able to use this. Here is my success story. Beautiful. And that will inspire and sort of motivate other people, trustworthy people, good people to come to us. And we're looking for them, inshallah. We have a clean heart, and we believe other people also have clean heart, inshallah.
All right. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Mr. Akmal and Dr. Ahmad Jamal, for your sharing. I have a lot of notes here to share, but then I think for the sake of time, and I think we are all very busy, especially both of you. We'll cut to the chase, and we thank you so much for sparing your time and your efforts, your sacrifice to promote this sort of new innovative financial model that is very relevant in this current problematic times, and also is actually very reflective of Islam. Okay, just to follow up, there will be another webinar not within Islamic Finance at Singapore and Ethis to commemorate the Idul Adha because it's just around the corner, right? So we have Dr. Hikmatullah and Mufti Yusuf from Ethis will be sharing about the economic significance of Korban from a micro and a macro perspective. So do keep a lookout for that webinar. And also, I have shared the link to the feedback form. Please, if you want more webinars such as this with Assadaqaat Community Finance to learn more about what they are trying to do, their training and all, please do fill up the form, and then they will get back to you. inshallah. For the email, Dr. Ahmad and Mr. Akmal, do you mind us sharing your email, or you have a separate email you want to share?
Yeah, should we do it on the chat?
Yes, can.
Okay. I can do it on the chat, yeah.
While Dr. Ahmad and Mr. Akmal is sharing their emails, just for the final one, you can please do follow Islamic Finance at Singapore and Ethis, and also Assadaqaat Community Finance on their social media. You can easily find us through the links provided by the brother Arslan, and the rest. I think some of you are already following the Islamic Finance at Singapore and also at this social media. And without further ado, let's call it a night. Thank you so much again, Mr. Akmal and Dr. Ahmad, and good evening to every one of you. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much. Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.